So, well, welcome to 25 years of women's studies at ETSU, and yay us, right? Right. So Heidi is putting in the chat our special 25 years of women's studies backgrounds for you to download if you want to grab a background for a virtual background for now or for use at other times. It's so great to see all your beautiful places from all over the world, from right here down the hall to Los Angeles, California. So it's so great to see you all. I'm so glad that you're here. You know, we originally planned our 25-year celebration as an open house in the campus center building with birthday cake. We had Dr. Johnson's popcorn machine. We were hoping to have, you're smiling, Dr. Holmes, but you're next. We were hoping to have a guest performance by Karen Shaka's Army. We were going to have storytelling and swag. We're still having swag, and we're still having storytelling, and we're still having celebration. Lots of folks helped with the planning of the original event, as well as this virtual event, including researching our 25-year Her Story, producing visuals like the backgrounds, virtual backgrounds, our celebration logo, our banners, our timeline, and also writing our press release for us. It really took a village, and that research, design, and publicity team includes, and I just want to shout out to all these folks that helped create this: Leah Bevins, Pat Buck, Martha Kopp, Anna Herbasi, Kathleen Grover, Zoe Hill, Amber Kinzer, Heidi Marsh, Marie Tedesco, Delene Watt, and our friends at the Archives of Appalachia. So it really is a village. We'd also like to thank the members of our current steering committee, who are the life, breath, energy, and passion behind everything women's studies at ETSU. A huge shout out and love to Jamie Brown, Pat Buck, Marquis Clark, Anna Herbasi, Jill Leroy Frazier, Heidi Marsh, Jean Swindle, Rebecca Tolley, Mickey White, and Delene Watt. So while we can't have cake on Zoom, and our Four Mothers banner and 25-year timeline is like squished down to PowerPoint size, we're really grateful to hold space for our story, to take time to remember our first 25 years, to elevate the people who've made this program possible and who've sustained it, even in hardship, and to tell a few stories about our past as we look forward to our future. And to enjoy some cool commemorative swag that we have for you. But Heidi's going to tell you about that at the end. So today, here's what I suggest that we do. I'd like to share a few highlights of our 25 years that I've collected from emails and discussions with Martha and Kathleen and Marie and Amber, and from combing through files housed over in the Archives of Appalachia. And then we have a few special guests who are planning to share a memory. And then we'll invite memories from the floor. So let's get started. Our story begins with our Four Mothers. If you don't know, the effort to develop a women's studies curriculum began in the early 1990s following a gender inequity study at ETSU that I believe the Commission on Women did. And this study identified sex biases in the university's curriculum, hiring practices, and salary scales. So Ann Clark, Marie Tedesco, BJ Bryson, Gail Stinsad, Ann LaCoy, Martha Kopp, Betty Cole, and Linda Curley formed a small group to pursue these issues and discuss how to address them. In 1991, they formed the first steering committee with the goal to establish an interdisciplinary women's studies program. Records housed in the Archives of Appalachia chronicle those discussions and the work that they did over the next 2 years. In 1993, the committee's efforts resulted in a new Women's Studies minor. And our first minor, Rebecca Tolley, graduated that next spring in 1994. Rebecca is now professor at Sherrod Library and a member of our current steering committee. So once the minor was established, the steering committee turned their attention to budgetary and administrative support to attain stability and visibility for the program. Our four mothers secured program status, the director position, and a room of our own, an office that would eventually be housed here in the campus center building. These goals were university support and institutional presence, and the first steering committee accomplished both. None of those things just came because you start a minor and you get these things. No, they had to work for every single aspect of that stability and visibility for the program. In 2000, Dr. Amber Kinzer was appointed as the Director of Women's Studies. Under her leadership, the program flourished. Tri-OTA was formed, and in 2002, the Notable Woman of ETSU Award was created to honor and celebrate notable women on campus whose work advanced our understanding of women and their lives. The first recipients, as you can see on the screen, were Dr. Susan Grover and Dr. Joyce Duncan, and we're getting ready to announce pretty soon the recipients for 2021. So over the course of the next decade, Dr. Kinzer and the steering committee built women's studies from a small but passionate collection of faculty members and courses into a lively campus program, offering a complete academic minor and supporting student organizations like FMLA that would become GEM, Tri-OTA, or our National Honor Society, HEROES, which would become SAGA, and actively engaging in social justice initiatives on campus and partnering with those in the community. In Volume 1, Issue 1, the inaugural Women's Studies newsletter, Dr. Kinzer wrote, "Empowerment, leadership, social justice. These three ideas serve as the cornerstone for women's studies at ETSU. We're a program that integrates theory with practice, thought with action, intellectual fervor with social change commitment. The vision, dedication, and resolve of the Women's Studies Steering Committee and the Women's Studies office staff has resulted in our being one of the most exciting and sought after programs on campus," end quote. In 2004, the steering committee began work towards a bachelor's degree. The major became official on January 25, 2007. And I love this. The very first students declared the major the very next day. They barely waited 24 hours. So with the major on the books, ETSU could now boast that it offered the first and only women's studies major in the Tennessee Board of Regents network of 13 colleges and universities. The names on the screen are some of the earliest Women's Studies Steering Committee members who served from 2000 to 2020 and whom we owe a debt of gratitude. Without their work, women's studies at ETSU just would not exist. We're also grateful for the members of the Women's Studies Network. This is our support network. This is our our blood and life breath as well. These are the people that hold us up, amplify our voices, and elevate us on our campus. And these are members from our earliest network. This is a list that came from the Archives of Appalachia. So, and you'll see lots of good friends in this list of the Women's Studies Network. This is the support group that you call when you say, we've got an initiative. These are the people who show up all the time. So in 2010, Dr. Kinzer stepped down to become chair of communications. and Dr. Karen Shaka became the second director of Women's Studies at ETSU. About becoming director, she wrote in the newsletter, and I can just hear her saying this. This is a quote. "I am basking in the glow of the warm welcome I have received from the amazing students, faculty, and staff that are ETSU Women's Studies. I see our diverse course offerings, our activism on campus and in the community, and our scholarly presentations and publications, and am both thrilled and proud to be a part of this vibrant and significant community." She continues, "As I consider the present and future of the ETSU Women's Studies program, I'm reminded of the Victorian poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning's admonition in Aurora Leigh that poet leaders must exert a double vision, should have eyes to see things as comprehensively as if afar they took their point of sight, and distant things as intimately deep as if they touched them. Let us strive for this." And Karen always did. As director until her unexpected and untimely passing in November of 2011, Dr. Shaka was our North Star who guided the program with that double vision that allowed her to see what was near with that sage perspective that comes with distance and what is far is intimately deep. To faculty, students, and staff alike, she was role model, educator, and always good friend. In January of 2012, I stepped in as director. I saw our first job as the program was to grieve our friend, colleague, teacher, and leader. Karen's loss was especially hard on our students and staff. And so we headed up to Roan Mountain for a long weekend of mindfulness practices and yoga, hikes and campfires, cooking and eating together, and group sessions led by a therapist to get us started and guide us on the beginning of this process. It was difficult. We felt lost, but we found traction in one another in the mountain. And so the steering committee and our student staff and I felt a deep need to value one another at this time and embrace the opportunity we found in a lecture series to amplify others' voices and to build community. And that's the start of the Women on Wednesday lecture series, to elevate the work of women on campus. I guess Karen started that. We started out with 3 in attendance at the very first event, and I was one of 3. Our audience has grown. This spring, our largest audience was 123 people who attended to hear Rebecca Tolley talk about her new book on trauma-informed libraries. So WOW's a great place to learn about new research that's going on campus, to have conversation about timely topics, and possibly even to find a mentor or a research buddy in the process. In 2013, the steering committee initiated a curriculum review process and study. We surveyed students and faculty. We held our first faculty retreat at the Highlander Education and Research Center to critically assess our curriculum and review and revise our mission, goals, and objectives. In the summer of 2014, we held a curriculum workshop and began the work to update the curriculum and our programming. And that next fall, we held our first Queer in Appalachia author series, which we hope to bring back in the near future. In 2015, we held a successful program review that many of you were a part of, and we were delighted with the strong assessment of the external reviewers from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and the University of Michigan at Dearborn. But despite a successful program review, support from our students and faculty, and a full curriculum revision and program proposal to transition from women's studies to women, gender, and sexuality studies, the major was terminated in 2016 due to low enrollments and not meeting projected graduation numbers in the 10th year. And the proposed curriculum revision and the name change were denied. But if women's studies at ETSU is anything, it's dedicated and resilient. Drawing on the strength of our foremothers, the passion of our steering committee, and that sage double vision that Karen reminds us of. In 2016, we continued to build our curriculum and started field testing the exciting new courses we created in response to student surveys. And those courses were sex, gender, and the body, men and masculinity, feminist methods of teaching and learning, queering the canon, and gender-based violence. Also, at this time, the steering committee took Becky Haas's and Andy Clement's trauma-informed care training workshops, and then collaborated with others across campus to build on that work to apply for, and eventually we received that same year a $10,000 National Avon Foundation grant for our work across campus on gender-based violence. And you can see the posters that we created through that grant in classroom buildings and dorms across campus. In 2017, with thanks to Dr. Catherine Weiss, we received Lila Instructional Development Funding, and with thanks to Heidi Marsh for spearheading a grant proposal to the Southeastern Women's Studies Association, we received an institutional grant for the trauma-informed work that we were doing in policy change and teaching methods in the program. And then in 2020, the steering committee received an ETSU instructional development grant to host an institute for the whole campus community on trauma-informed teaching and learning. Dr. Janice Corella was our keynote, and we had 167 registrants. Just this past summer, 2020, we reproposed our curriculum revision and received approval on it and on our name change to WGSS, which is an intentional move to embrace gender and sex diversity as a visible part of our curriculum, values, and mission as a program. These changes you'll be able to see in our August 21 university catalog, and we are so delighted. This coming summer, we've been invited to an EAB workshop with other programs at ETSU and across the state. We're close to launching our fully online minor, and we have a new curricular initiative on the table and under planning and discussion at steering committee meetings. We're really proud of our story. We look to build on that strong legacy and are excited about what's to come in the next 25 years. We have a few special guests here today that plan to share a story. And so I'd like to get those started with a short video from Dr. Amber Kinzer. Dr. Kinzer is, of course, teaching class right now. So she couldn't be with us, but she prepared a video so that she could join us in that way. So I am going to share my screen, and it'll take me just a moment. So here's Dr. Kinzer.
Hi, Amber Kinzer here. This is such an exciting time, 25 years. 25 years of women's studies, absolutely remarkable. I'm so excited for the program to have an opportunity to celebrate such a milestone. Man, that's exciting. Okay, so I was the director of women's studies from 2000 until 2010. And then Karen Shaka took over when I moved to another department. And then sadly, we lost her. And then Dr. Thompson served at the helm of the program, under whom it has really just absolutely flourished. Has been so exciting to see it not just survive, but to really thrive. I mean, I remember when we first started Tri Iota, when we first were able to occupy the current space that it's in. I'm right down the hall, so it's exciting to see just how active and engaged the program is, not only on campus, but also in our community. We've seen the endurance of the Notable Women of ETSU program, where we've watched that grow and thrive for many, many years now. We still have the newsletter. We have participation at Southeast Women's Studies Association. Just really exciting work happening from women's studies faculty and women's studies students. The Women on Wednesday speaker series is just a thrill to see how vibrant women's studies and now women, gender, and sexuality studies has been over the years. I'm particularly excited about the women, gender, and sexuality studies change and the development of a broader kind of curriculum and ways of thinking. Very happy to be at an institution that has a minor like that. And I'm thrilled that despite some potential setbacks, the women's studies people, advocates and steering committee and affiliate faculty just refused to let it fade, even when there were moments when it looked like administration was going to pull back on their support, but you stayed with it, and it's really just so lovely and vibrant. Thank you for inviting me to have a couple of comments here at today's celebration. I'm so sorry that my teaching schedule kept me from being there, but I am really happy for y'all and looking forward to watching another 25 years of women, gender, and sexuality studies at ETSU.
They were so great. So we also have it, and is it okay if I just call on you with folks? Martha, would you like to start? And Heidi is going to unmute you. There you go.
Oh, good. Luckily, Heidi and I didn't cancel each other out there because I was like going for the unmute. Hi, everyone. This is really a tremendous moment. And some of you may know me, some of you don't know me, but it was really exciting to look at the pictures that Dr. Thompson had shared and to see so many faces of students that I recognized, former students. And I'm glad to see some of those folks are here today. So it's just a tremendous honor. And Phyllis gave me a list of several things that would be it kind of prompts, which is like a great teacher that she is. Here's some prompts so that I wouldn't have a brain freeze. And a couple of these I thought were something that I could share, and maybe it will, at least it will confirm some of the history that Dr. Thompson has shared. But what it was like to help create the Women's Studies unit on campus. I came to ETSU in 1993, and that meant that the Women's Studies minor had already been approved. And somehow word got out, I think because I was teaching gender and society, word got out like, oh, well, there's a new faculty member in sociology and anthropology. Let's invite her. And so it was some of the other foremothers who invited me to jump in, and was really excited. These were also the only committee meetings I ever did that were not boring. When I was first starting out, I had some intensely boring committee meetings where, you just have people who are professional meeting goers. And I kind of learned to sort of dart in and say, hey, can we get something done here? And the Women's Studies Steering Committee never needed those kinds of prompts. I love collaborating every semester with the steering committee members. And I have a few notes here just so I don't forget to say things. I always beat myself up afterwards if I forget something that I wanted to share with y'all. It was just really fun to work with people and to make sure that there would be a variety of courses offered for our students, and also trying to create strong educational programming, of which I had zero experience as somebody who was straight out of grad school. And so serving on that committee and then co-chairing, I think I followed right after BJ Bryson, and then Marie Tedesco co-chaired with me at least 1 or 2 years. And so doing that gave me, it helped me understand some of the nuts and bolts of how the university worked. It helped me understand how a university has to function. And it gave me valuable leadership experience that helped me go on to become chair of my home department, sociology and anthropology, for 8 years, of which I'm very happy to have behind me. Leadership is really hard. What being part of women's studies means then and now is that steering committee work helped me appreciate the critical need for continuity for our students that could only be achieved through the position of a women's studies program director and a home on campus for women's studies students. And so kudos, and a home for women's studies students, faculty, and staff. And I wanted to say kudos to Dr. Amber Kinzer and colleagues at that time who made it happen. And then until that point, and including afterwards, as we know, that administrators struggled to understand that this minor, and for the while that it was a major, like the Black American Studies minor, they have a role. Both of these programs have a public role that is service, education, and activism. It's essential to our university and to our surrounding community. And other programs don't have that. I mean, it was almost easier to be a department chair, quite honestly, because I didn't have to create public programming. And so this is just a responsibility that requires consistent institutional support for students and faculty to thrive. And then I'm grateful to the past directors, Dr. Amber Kinzer and Dr. Karen Shaka, as well as the previous chairs and co-chairs of the steering committee, for their hard work and community-minded spirit. And I'm grateful to our current director, Dr. Phyllis Thompson, who added the year-round educational programming that the Women on Wednesdays events and just other regular speaking events, so that women's studies has a higher profile, and now women in gender and sexuality studies has a higher profile on campus. And there's this just important vibrancy to it that I think is essential and is present. And so every year, the other thing I really appreciate is that Dr. Thompson takes undergrad students and grad students, and her colleagues too, take them to present at professional conferences. And I'm in awe of those achievements. And they are things that I couldn't do, but that's why we work as a team, and why together we accomplish so much more than we would ever be able to accomplish individually. So thanks for the opportunity to celebrate our 25 years of women's studies, and next going into women, gender, and sexuality studies. Thanks.
Thank you for being a forematter who got us started and sustained us. You also helped so much on the program review, and I appreciate that as well. So you've been a partner all along, Martha, and just
thank you
so much.
Well, it's an honor. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Jamie Brown is a member of our current and has been a long-standing member of the steering committee in women's studies. So, Jamie.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take off from the first time I ever saw Martha Kopp. I was invited to a women's studies committee meeting, I guess they called it at the time, by Marie Tedesco. And I went into a room, I think it was in Wharf Pickle, and there was Martha and Marie chairing the committee. And from that time forward, I think that was in 1997. And I've been a consistent member on the steering committee ever since. And I have to tell you one of the stories that always means a lot to me because it really touches home. Every time I would come back to the department, at that time I was the chair in Hutchinson, and every time I would come back to the department, Mary Langenbrunner would go, "You're in such a good mood. What's going on?" It was just a different experience, and has continued to be, being a part of the steering committee. I've never come out, no matter, even when we got bad news, and we've had bad news a couple of times, but the support and the concern and the care was so palatable. I mean, it's just such a wonderful experience. And I was felt welcome from the very beginning of the time that I spent with the steering, or first the committee and then the steering committee. But the story I want to share with you is a trip we made to Sosa in a 15-passenger van. And I think, was there 16 of us in that van? Because I think I might have been sitting on a paint bucket. I'm not sure. I was the last person they picked up. They were kind enough, because I live over the mountain, and so they were kind enough to come to Weaverville, and Mary Langenbrunner met us in the middle of the night. I think it was like 5 o'clock in the morning or something. Y'all picked me up. And we rode all the way down to Florida. And the highlight of that trip, besides all the wonderful time we had at the beach and, just the camaraderie and the wonderful group that was there, I got to present on a panel with Hill and Jake. And it doesn't get better than that. It just really doesn't get better than that. It was such a wonderful experience. And it has just been a joy all through all the transitions that we've had. And we've been sad to see people come off the committee, and then someone wonderful always comes on the committee. We've been sad when we've lost directors, and then we end up with Phyllis. It just doesn't get better than that. It's just been a wonderful experience from start to finish. And it was heartbreaking at the time we lost the major and didn't get to change our name. But now we have changed our name, and we will get that major back. It will happen. I fully believe that. I think it's just a matter of time. But thank all of you for every part you've played in. I had a whole list of students I was going to mention, because they're the ones that touch me the most, but I was so afraid I'd forget somebody. So I decided not to go through my list, but you all know who they are.
Jamie, thank you so much. And I feel exactly the same about steering committee meetings, and also that trip to Florida Atlantic. That was a pretty amazing trip. So thank you for sharing about that and about the steering committee. Speaking of students, we do have a student here that said that she would be happy to share a story. Jaden Finch was our last major to graduate from ETSU with a major. So we have our first minor who graduated and our last major who graduated. So Jaden, let me turn the floor over to you.
Hello, I did graduate this past May. It's nice to see everybody here. It's kind of crazy because a lot of the people on the call I've had as professors, and I miss everybody. It's kind of sad. But when I think about ETSU Women's Studies, have a bunch, like a whole timeline, my whole 3 years at ETSU of like positive memories. I think that for those of you that don't know, I'm from upstate New York, and I was really, really nervous about moving to the South. I know it's a different culture, and it was just something I wasn't familiar with. And coming to a campus that's pretty large, I didn't know how I was going to adjust. And I think Women's Studies gave me a nice place to land. It made it feel like a small campus amongst a big campus. The one thing that, if I had to pick something, came out in my mind was my senior capstone. I was in that office like at least 2 days a week for an entire semester. And towards the end, we didn't really know if we were going to be able to pull it together or not, because there was supposed to be a big snowstorm. And it was kind of a lot in one. We had some big goals for it, or I did anyway. But seeing all of the people that did show up and were willing to put in, and what we got out of that capstone. For those of you that don't know, I did a tabling event in the CPA, and it was on like reproductive health. And the women's studies were there. Professor Novotny did a table on her classes. And we were connected with some new resources that we added to the big list in ETSU Women's Studies book of resources that we didn't know about. And just seeing that kind of networking and all of the people that not necessarily helped that day, but that it could potentially help in the future, that really kind of solidified how important ETSU Women's Studies is on the campus, and just how like vibrant and what it adds to the campus. I also think that, as I don't remember who said it earlier, but probably Professor Kopp, but it is, while it's hard that you guys have to do programming for everybody, every time a big like scandal happens on campus and I hear about it, women's studies is always the first to come out and say, this is the side of that we're on. This is the appropriate side. This is what we support. And I think it's important that students know that there is a department on campus that has their back, regardless of what everybody else is saying and what the norm is. So for that, I can speak for the students, at least we are extremely grateful. So that's my addition.
Well, Women's Studies is extremely grateful for Jaden as well, because it's all because of, and you did have big ideas on that capstone. I mean, it was huge. You weren't the only one who thought that. Everybody in the office thought that. So, but you did a great job. And because of you, we have an ongoing partnership now with Roz and A Step Ahead. This semester, we just partnered with them and the Women's Resource Center to do a reproductive justice for people of color series of panel discussions. And that relationship got started all because of that snow day capstone that you did over in the CPA. So that's, so there's, you have a legacy here in the work you did. Created a legacy of partnership between Women's Studies and Women's Resource Center. The Pride Center is a part of that, and A Step Ahead in Roz. So your presence continues to be felt on this campus, Jaden. So we love you and miss you a bunch.
Well, thank you. I miss you guys all so much. I know I hopped on the Zoom call and I was like, I miss everybody. Like, I'm sorry I had to graduate.
Yeah.
I'm sad.
Yeah. So, well, like I said, Jaden was our, last major to graduate, but Rebecca Tolley, who's professor at Sherrod Library, and we just celebrated with her new book that came out on trauma-informed care in libraries, was our very first minor and our first minor to graduate. So I wanted Rebecca to get the say a word.
Thank you, Phyllis. So yeah, I guess I have two short stories that I can share. One of them was that I was the first minor, and the minor was so new that, and it was in the philosophy department because I was a philosophy minor before I was a women's studies minor. And so I worked with the secretary and Dr. Gail Stenstad to figure out like which one of my classes would count toward the major, because I had taken minority oppression with Laura Waddy, and there was enough in there that would count. And so, but since I was the first minor, I've kind of felt like I was doing it in a vacuum, because we didn't really have the kind of, it was in its infancy. So we didn't have the kind of space or the kind of numbers of enrollment, students in the minor, students in the major, that it grew into. And so I feel like I missed out on that, because what Jamie and other people have said is that the culture of women's studies is very positive and nurturing, and just, it's a safe place to be on campus. And you don't always feel that everywhere across campus. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that Karen, I'm sorry, I think my dogs are going to bark in a minute because there's someone walking by my windows, but I had approached Karen Shaka in July of 2011 about teaching the intro class, because I'd been on the steering committee years ago, like in 2000, and she needed people to teach as an adjunct because they needed more people. And I had talked to my dean at the time, Rita Scher, about, I'd love to do this. Could I do this? And she was like, Rebecca, wait until you are tenured and then you can do it. Well, so I was tenured in 2005, but it wasn't until 2011 that I felt like I would really like to do this. I felt comfortable enough in like public speaking that I could, manage a semester long class. So when I talked to her, she was really excited, and she was like, Rebecca, I have this section that I can't find anyone to teach, and and she said she was just didn't know what she was going to do, and how wonderful it was that I came and, said I would love to teach it. And she said something about that her father had told her, not to give up hope when things were looking difficult, that, something would come out in the end. And I always really was glad that I could do that for her. And then it was really sad when we lost her that fall. But those are kind of two of my stories that I have, and I'm really proud to be a part of women's studies. And it's really exciting that we're celebrating 25 years. And I'm excited to hear everyone else's stories too.
I knew part of that story, but I didn't know the whole story. So thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. Wow. Thank you so much. I'm glad we have that down as part of our story now, because that's really special. Darcy Martin, who is one of our adjuncts, who also teaches the intro course, couldn't be here. She's in South Carolina, but is still she's retired, but is still teaching for us. But she wrote. She wasn't comfortable with Zoom, but she was comfortable writing something, and so I'm going to read you what she wrote. And this is Darcy Martin. And if you know Darcy, it just sounds just like her. She says, "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to share a bit of her story with Women's Studies at ETSU. Many of you are taking part in this celebration, are friends and acquaintances, and there are those that I've never met, but I'm confident we share a common bond in the essentialness of women's studies. When I arrived at ETSU in the spring of 1994, I was angry, disappointed, and believing I had reached a new low in my life. I'd interrupted my college education when I got married at the ripe old age of 20, and raised and educated a family of 3 daughters, and moved to my husband's new employment a lot. So when I arrived at ETSU with an associate's degree in business earned a few years previous and discovered that employees could attend the university for free, I jumped right in to complete my degree, which I'd started in 1958 at a junior college in northern Minnesota. And so one of my first courses was Introduction to Women's Studies, which I took in the fall of 1995 and fell in love. Some of the most meaningful moments in my life have occurred when I became a teacher of women's studies. I've taught the Intro to Women's Studies course and the director of 4 incredible women, and I'm grateful for their counsel. In addition, I've had my scholarship published in journals, attended conferences, served as an area chair for the Popular Culture Association, and received recognition for work I'd done on a book that I published, all after the age of 60. A few years ago, it was my profound pleasure to share my library of some 500 volumes, all with a women's studies focus, with ETSU in memory of Dr. Karen Shaka. And those books, that collection, is at the Sherrod Library. And now to the most important part of my journey that began in 1995. That's my students. Perhaps they've learned things from me, so they've said in numerous evaluations, but I've learned so much more from them and have grown in ways that I could not have imagined. I remember a student comment from one of my first classes, quote, "Miss Martin is knowledgeable, but she should not read from her notes so much." Well, I took that to heart. And then there are stories from my students' lives. The married student in her 40s who told me that her husband didn't want her to take my course because he worried she'd forget her place. That was my second semester teaching. Stories of abuse, of bullying, of incest, tragedies of all kinds that always brought me to tears. And then the stories of determination, resolve, and courage, and humorous ones as well. Over my 20 years, I've met students of all races, religions, ages, majors, sexual orientation, and political persuasion. Each has left a mark on my life. Why do I continue to teach? because I continue to learn something from my students every semester, sometimes about life, more often than not about myself. Every semester, every single semester, one, two, or more students leave comments like, "You opened my eyes to a new way of thinking. Thank you for teaching this class." Or, "Do you teach any other classes?" And then I sign up for one more semester. Thank you for allowing me to share some of my history. Truthfully, words are inadequate. Certainly, my words are inadequate to describe the experiences that began the day I walked into Intro to Women's Studies and found my calling. I close with a favorite quote from Emily Dickinson: "I dwell in possibility. And as long as there's a women's studies program, the possibilities are infinite." Pat Buck is also here, and one of our long-term steering committee members and professors in women's studies.
I do not, my remarks are not prepared, but I think I would like to start by thanking Darcy. It's through my acquaintance with Darcy, I think that is how I got into women's studies to begin with. She and I, back in the mid-90s, both worked for the Department of Family Medicine, not the clinic, but the academic department. And we became acquainted there, and we had some wonderful feminist conversations. And she was happy to, have somebody she could talk about books with. And probably at that time, I could tell her about books that she hadn't read yet, but she later far outstripped me in her education. And it was around that time, and this is a time when Martha and Marie Tedesco were chairing the committee. They were looking for an adjunct. They were looking for somebody to teach the one section of Intro to Women's Studies that existed. And they had somebody like near the end of the fall semester, the person who was teaching, and I can see her face, but I don't know her name. She got a real job. And so they were looking for someone to teach the spring section. And they asked one longtime adjunct who said, "No, I got enough to do," who asked another longtime adjunct who said, "I got enough to do," who asked me. And I said, "Why not?" I've considered, I'm of an age where I couldn't have had a degree in women's studies. But, I'd called myself a feminist since 1969. So, why not? And so that was the beginning of my work with teaching women's studies. And it was Darcy who introduced me to the committee. She, as an undergrad, participated in that committee. I don't know that membership was very formal. And I have felt very privileged ever since, I think it was 1997, to teach the course and other courses, to be a member of the steering committee, and particularly privileged because for most of my career, I have been an adjunct. And I think that says something about women's studies, that women's studies values and trusts people to be decision makers without regard to titles or hierarchies. And so it really has been my privilege. I have a story. I'm going to tell a story from my first semester teaching. And it's a story I've told a number of times. I tell it to students. First of all, at that time, there was only one section, and it was actually hard to get into. I mean, one section of 25 people. And so consequently, the students who could get in most of them were athletes who get priority in registration, and upper level students from the School of Ed, because at that time the women's studies class fulfilled a diversity requirement for education students. So in my first class, I had 4 football players. And by the way, I've hardly ever taught an intro class that did not have men in it. So I don't think they knew what they were getting into, but they were, they worked at it. They did okay. And then one day, it came a time to have a discussion of rape. And one of these students spoke up and he said, but women can lie. And so I tried to tell him how underreported it is, and statistics about how women aren't believed, but women can lie. And I tried with more statistics, but he was immovable, and so was I. But so we dropped it, and it wasn't until I was in my car on the way home, or maybe the next morning, that I figured out what was going on. This young man was part of a demographic who have been murdered when women lie. He was Black. And this was my education in intersectionality before I even knew the word. I was humbled. I was illuminated. We talked about it in class the next day. And this is the kind of really important things that one can learn from teaching. So I have his name written down somewhere. I don't remember it now, but I'm very grateful. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. It's a special story. We have time for those. It's so good to see. I see students that I haven't seen in a long time, and other faculty and staff members. It's so good to have you here. So if others would like to share a memory or a story, we'd love to have you do that now.
Well, I'm going to say something because I have really just enjoyed myself with this celebration of 25 years. I tell you, and I was typing something in the chat and I said, no, I don't need to type this in the chat. I need to say this to these women to let them know how dear you all are to my heart. I have not been a part of the Women's Studies actual program or within your steering committee, but you have been in my heart for many, many, many years with all of the students that I have went through this program with. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking of Jake, of Ashley, and I don't even want to start calling names. Doretha, just so many students that within in student life that I have ran across and that have brought so much history to me that I have shared the love with you all, but not been there to share it with you. Mm-hmm. But I've got it in my heart. And I just felt like I needed to say that to you all today because I've never told Amber and I've never really told you, Phyllis, or Pat, or any of the other ladies, Martha. I mean, all of you all. I'm just so proud and just, it makes me happy to be a part of the university that is celebrating 25 years. I mean, I know for years, and I thought that we had lost when we lost Harriet, the Women's Resource Center. It was just so great to know that, Phyllis, you brought that back into the program. I'm just so glad we're not losing these things. And I do believe that one day we will bring back that major. And as long as I'm here, I will push for it. But I just wanted to say congratulations to you all on 25 years. And I am proud to be a woman at ETSU at this time.
Laura, thank you so much. And I totally agree with Martha that says you showed it all along. And you have, if you recall, when we first started planning this, we were trying to figure out how to get a t-shirt. And I mentioned that at a meeting that Laura was in, and Laura said, don't worry, we'll help you get that. We'll help you pay for the t-shirt. No worries at all. Heidi's going to tell you about a t-shirt in a minute, but Laura Terry, you said, don't you worry, we've got you covered. We'll get you that t-shirt. So you've been right here supporting us and collaborating with us for a long time, Laura Terry. We love you and we appreciate you. So, and I see that Marquis Clark has his hand up. So, Marquis.
Well, I guess I just wanted to express an appreciation. The Probably the very first academic home I ever found was at my alma mater in the Women's Studies department at Kansas State. And so leaving there and coming out to East Tennessee years ago was difficult. And my experience when I came out here to coach in athletics, so many of the issues we're seeing highlighted right now in that department were still on display then. And that was so much of my experience. And so I didn't really have a home anywhere professionally, academically, until Phyllis and Heidi really sight unseen. And I don't know if it was reckless or bold, but gave me an opportunity to get back into teaching, and have been so welcoming and encouraging of my participation in the steering committees or the work that I think Rebecca and Pat and I and Heidi were able to do on changing the book a few years ago, and just being able to participate in those types of projects and those types of experiences here have been really fantastic. So I thank you so much for being so welcoming and so accommodating, and I can't wait to actually go back in the office again.
Thank you, Marquis. Other memories or burning things that you want to share? Well, speaking of t-shirts and commemorative swag, let me turn the floor over to Heidi Marsh.
All right, y'all. Well, I'm going to create a Google form. So we have a lovely, lovely t-shirt that we've created that I think it's possible that Delene, she's holding up right now. If you've got us on gallery view on the front, it took us a long time to choose those names of women that we wanted to honor. And it took maybe even longer to research all of the people to put on the back of the t-shirt who've made significant contributions to the program. And so we're very much looking forward to sharing those t-shirts with you. And so you'll be seeing in your email in the next couple of days a link to a Google form where you can let me know what size shirt you would like. And then if you have a campus box, we'd be happy to send your shirt to your campus box. If you are not on campus, we'd be happy to mail you a t-shirt. And you're always welcome. Our office is open, during regular business hours. So if you feel a need to stop over and say, well, I don't know if I want this size or this size, you are welcome to do that as well. We're in Campus Center Building 211. But like I said, just watch your email. I'll send you that link and you can let us know what size shirt you would like, and we will make sure it gets to your person.
Yay. Thank you, Heidi. And Heidi, thank you for figuring that out and how we were going to do that. Heidi and Darlene have organized all the background stuff for us today. So we were able to have a PowerPoint and show videos and mute and unmute and get in and out. So many thanks to the tech genius of my colleagues, and I love y'all a bunch. Thank you all for being here to share our 25-year celebration, and we're going to look forward this summer and in the fall of rolling out women, gender, and sexuality studies. We are so excited about that. So thank you again for being here, and we look forward to another 25 years. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.